It was the kind of story that broke you, piece by piece, until you no longer knew who you were. My name is Eli Thomas, and for most of my life, I had been the disappointment, the failure, the one who was always almost good enough, but never quite there. It was never the one big blow that got to me. It was the small, steady erosion of my soul, piece by piece, over the years. I had always been that kid who couldn't seem to get anything right. Not at school, not at home, not in life. My parents were proud of my older brother, Jonathan perfect grades, sports trophies, friends who looked up to him. They didn't have to try with him, but me? I was invisible to them. There was one memory that stands out above all others. I just got my first C on a history test, and my mother's disappointment was written across her face like a permanent scar. "Why can't you be more like Jonathan?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. But the words stung nonetheless. I had tried so hard, and yet nothing was ever enough. I tried to fight back the tears, but it was futile. Every word they said, every judgment, was a reminder that I was always going to fall short. The name Dropout was the one that stuck to me, no matter how much I tried to shake it off. It was after high school when it all fell apart. College acceptance letters arrived, and while Jonathan had received an invitation to attend the university they dreamed of, I received rejection after rejection. The letters were like cruel reminders, each one a knock on my self-worth, a label that defined me. Not good enough, it said. Not worthy of their expectations. I didn't even have the heart to tell my parents. It felt like they're disapproving. Sighs would swallow me whole. So I did the only thing I could think to do. I dropped out. I didn't tell anyone. I packed a bag, found a cheap apartment, and took a low-paying job at a convenience store just to get by. It was a life of quiet misery, where the only sounds were the hum of the cash register and the ticking of the clock, each minute reminding me that I had failed. I remember lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I went wrong. The dreams I once had of being someone important, someone who mattered, had vanished. They were like whispers carried away by the wind, lost forever. The betrayal I felt wasn't just from the world. It was from those I trusted most, my parents, my family, the people who had given up on me long before I ever had the chance to give up on myself. But there was a turning point, a moment that felt like the flicker of a candle in the dark. It was a simple ad I saw on TV one night, a call for applicants for a prestigious scholarship at the university I had always dreamed of attending. It was my shot at redemption. But could I do it? Could I climb back from the wreckage of my past? I thought about it long and hard. In the silence of my apartment, I found myself questioning everything, my worth, my future, and whether or not I should even try. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that the only way to move forward was to jump, but being terrified of what would happen if I did. I was terrified of failing again, of being the failure I had always been. But something in me refused to let go. Maybe it was the little spark of hope that had survived all these years, buried deep inside me. Maybe it was the voice inside my head that whispered, "You can still change." So I applied. I poured my heart into that application. Every ounce of regret, every wasted year, every drop of pain I had carried, I folded it into those words. It was all I had. I had nothing to lose. I waited and waited. It was the longest month of my life. And then it came. The letter. The one that would change everything. It arrived with the same cold, impersonal font as the rejections from years ago, but this one was different. This time I opened it slowly, heart racing, as if the letter could sense how badly I needed it. My fingers shook as I read the words. And there at the bottom was the one line that shattered my world in a way I never thought possible. "We are pleased to offer you a full scholarship." My heart stopped. For a moment, everything else in the world ceased to exist. It was just me and the words on the page. I had made it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't breathe. The weight that had crushed me for years was suddenly gone. The doubts, the fears, the shame, all of it vanished in the blink of an eye. But as the initial rush of excitement passed, Another feeling crept in. Fear. Fear of facing the people who had written me off. Fear of confronting my parents. Fear of seeing their faces when they found out I had done something they had never believed I could. But there was also another emotion, one I hadn't anticipated. It was rage. I had spent my entire life living in their shadow, trying to be someone I was not, trying to fit into a mold they had created for me. They had never seen me, never truly believed in me. And now, after all these years, after every word they had, used to break me down, I was about to prove them wrong. I wasn't the failure they thought I was. The day I told my parents, I was calm, surprisingly so. They were watching TV when I handed them the letter. Their eyes went from confusion to disbelief to something I couldn't quite place. For a moment, they were silent, as if they couldn't process what they were reading. And then the questions came. How? How did you even get in? I could feel the pride welling up inside of me, but I kept it hidden. Instead, I just smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. I applied, I said, letting the words hang in the air like a question they would never ask again. For the first time in my life, my parents were speechless, and that was when it hit me. They had never believed in me, never thought I was good enough, and now their son had done something they thought was impossible. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to make them understand. I needed to show them what it felt like to be left in the dark, to be forced to confront the truth they had spent so long burying. I realized then that it wasn't just about getting into the university. It was about something much bigger. It was about revenge. They had made me feel less than for so long, and now I was going to make them see who I truly was. I didn't just want their approval. I wanted them to feel the weight of their betrayal, the damage they had done to me. But first, I needed to play the part. I needed to give them the illusion of victory before I could take it all away. I couldn't rush this. The plan had to be perfect. I would take my time, let them get comfortable, let them believe that they had won. But deep down, I knew that my victory would be sweet. When the moment came, I would make them regret every harsh word they had ever said to me. For now, though, I waited. I watched. And I kept my plan hidden, tucked away in the deepest corners of my mind. But I knew one thing for sure. They would pay for every single moment they had made me feel worthless. Every single moment they had called me the dropout. The time for revenge was coming. And it would be glorious. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I had worked so hard for it, for the scholarship, for the chance to prove myself. But now that I had it, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Everything seemed different, and the weight of my parents' silence was suffocating. They'd seen me for the first time as something more than the dropout, but instead of pride, all I saw in their eyes was confusion. I'd spent years fighting for their approval. I had buried every ounce of my frustration beneath a thick layer of apathy, convincing myself that it didn't matter. But now, with the scholarship in my hand, I realized it mattered more than anything. Because deep down, I wasn't just seeking the approval of a university, I was fighting for something bigger. I wanted my parents to see me, truly see me for the first time in my life. But the truth was, they'd never really seen me. Not the real me. The scholarship was my victory, yes. But it was also the beginning of a new, darker journey, a journey that would leave a mark on everyone who had ever looked down on me, starting with my parents. As I stood in front of them, my father and mother sitting together on the couch, their faces lit by the flickering TV, I felt the walls closing in. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. I handed them the letter. I watched their fingers tremble as they read. My heart pounded in my chest, but I held my breath. How? My mother whispered, the disbelief in her voice cutting through the tension. You? How could you possibly? The words hung in the air like a blade, hovering dangerously, close to my skin. It was the same question they'd asked before when I was younger, when I failed my first exam. When I didn't get into the university they wanted me to, how could you possibly? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had already given them the answer. It was in the letter. But even as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. They were stunned, yes, but they weren't proud. Their faces, pale and full of shock, betrayed no emotion but confusion. They couldn't understand, and that, in its own way, was a betrayal. In the days that followed, I went through the motions. I enrolled in the university. I attended the classes. I pushed myself harder than ever before, determined to prove that I was more than just the dropout. But something began to shift inside me. The bitterness, the resentment that I'd buried for so long, began to creep up from the depths of my soul. It was subtle at first, just fleeting moments of frustration. But then it grew, feeding on my doubts, my insecurities. Every time I saw the way my parents looked at me, like they didn't quite believe I belonged in the world I had stepped into, the resentment festered. I couldn't shake the feeling that they didn't deserve to be part of this victory. They had never believed in me. And that realization hit me like a slap in the face, one that left me gasping for air. I began to look at them differently, as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. The little things I had overlooked, the quiet dismissals, the offhand comments, the way they constantly compared me to Jonathan started to feel like pieces of a puzzle I had been too blind to see. They weren't just indifferent. They had actively belittled me. And now, here I was, standing on the edge of something they couldn't even fathom. They hadn't just doubted me. They had made me believe I wasn't worthy of my own dreams. It was then that I realized I had been betrayed. Not just by the world, but by the people I had trusted most. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And that betrayal, it had twisted something inside me. I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I began to piece together the truth bit by bit. I dug into my past, revisiting old conversations, old moments. There were things I hadn't noticed before, things that had slipped by in the rush of life. I thought back to the years when I had struggled with my grades, the times I felt like I was never good enough, no matter how hard I tried. I realized that every rejection, every harsh word from my parents had been part of a slow, insidious manipulation. They had told me I wasn't enough, over and over until I started to believe it. And it wasn't just about my failure. It was about their control. They needed me to fail, to be less than, so that they could feel better about themselves. They needed me to stay small, to remain invisible, so that their carefully constructed world didn't shatter. The anger inside me began to boil over. I had spent so many years trying to earn their love, their respect. I had sacrificed pieces of myself, trying to be the person they wanted me to be. But now I was ready to stop playing their game. The first time I saw my father after realizing all of this, I felt sick to my stomach. It was as if the years of built-up anger had finally found their outlet, and now every interaction with him felt like a battle. I could see the way he still didn't quite understand, as if the reality of my success hadn't fully registered in his mind. He saw me as the same kid who had failed his way through life, but I wasn't that kid anymore. I began to distance myself from them. I focused on my studies, poured my energy into my classes, into my new life. But every day, the sense of betrayal gnawed at me. It was inescapable, like a shadow following me wherever I went. And then, one evening, as I sat alone in my room, I realized something. This was bigger than just proving them wrong. I had spent so long focused on their perception of me trying to earn their approval that I had never stopped to question the foundation of their belief in me. What if the truth was that they had always seen me as disposable? A failure that could be easily discarded when I didn't meet their expectations. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just angry. I was determined. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that my victory, my success, wasn't just about escaping their control. It was about something deeper, something darker. It was about taking back control of my life. I would show them. I would show them all, but not in the way they expected. Not by simply succeeding. No, my revenge would be more calculated, more precise. I would make them see the cost of their betrayal, of their manipulation, and so I began to formulate my plan. I would have to be patient, bide my time, let them think that I had forgiven them, let them believe they had won. But I knew that deep down I could never truly forgive them, not for everything they had done. I would make them regret ever doubting me. The plan began to take shape slowly, methodically. I would begin with small acts letting slip details of things they thought they knew, exposing their lies piece by piece. I would manipulate the people they trusted, twist their world until it cracked, but I would not reveal everything at once. I would make them suffer just as they had made me suffer all those years. And as I stood in my room that night, staring out the window at the moonlit sky, I knew that it was time. It was time to take control. It was time for my revenge. But even as I steeled myself for the coming storm, I couldn't ignore the heavy weight in my chest, the part of me that still longed for their love, the part of me that wished things had been different. That part of me still hoped for something I could never have. And that's what made it so hard. But it also made it inevitable. The time for patience was over. The time for action had come. And my revenge would be the only thing left to set me free.